and the meeting is live.
Thank you very much. Welcome, colleagues, staff, to today's Corporate Services Committee meeting held virtually on April 14th. Holy cow, where's the year gone? I'd first like to acknowledge our gathering this afternoon virtually throughout the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people and welcome you to today's agenda. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item of business is approval of the agenda.
So moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Legault again, please.
The next item is adoption of the Corporate Services Committee meeting minutes of February 10th, 2021.
Any errors or omissions? Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, Ms. Legault, any business arising?
No business arising, and there were no requests to join for public input period. So that brings us to delegations. And I'm just admitting our delegates to the meeting. So it's Megan Charlton, Director of Member Services and General Counsel, and Sherman Chow, Director of Claims from the Municipal Insurance Association of BC. And this presentation is for information.
Great, thank you for joining us today. This was by request that we have you join us for a little update. You'll have 10 minutes, but I'm sure if need be, we can gauge the interest of my colleagues and we can extend that if necessary. Please, if you will.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. I think we had planned on a bit more than 10 minutes, so but Sherman and I will kind of try and whip through it as quickly as possible. My name is Megan Charlton. I'm Director of Member Services at the MIABC. Sherman and I were here to speak to the board, I think 3 years ago, to share a little bit of background about the MIABC. And so I think you are somewhat familiar with us. We are a member-owned and operated insurance reciprocal. So the Cowichan Valley Regional District is a member of both our property and our liability insurance pools, where our members pool their resources and their insurance dollars together to provide insurance for each other. We now have 167 local governments that are on our programs. We just added one of your neighbors this past year, Port Alberni, and we're comprised of about 90% of the local governments in British Columbia. And the cornerstones of a self-insurance pool like the MIABC were really about stability of rates, flexibility of coverage, and control over your coverage and claims. And today we're just going to touch on some of the member services and the claims handling principles. So what we do at the MIABC, we respond to liability and property claims. And so when you have a claim, someone sues you because someone has tripped and fallen on one of at your recreation facility, or there is their home has been flooded and they sue you, or alternately you've sustained damage from flooding to your own property or by fire, you'll call us and we'll handle the claim. We also, particularly for our members of our property program, we provide broker services and source ancillary coverage. So if you need cyber insurance, you need environmental impairment liability insurance, you need any of those specialized insurance products, we have an in-house brokerage that can help you. We facilitate non-claim related legal advice through our casual legal advice program, of which the regional district is a member. We can provide loss control services, and we provide risk management education and training. I'm going to talk a little bit today about some specific insurance products, and I can talk if the board would like to hear a little bit more detail on the specific member services that the MIABC offers, and then also about the board's specific use of those member services. But with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sherman for a very quick overview of the history of the MIABC.
Thank you very much, Megan. The MIABC has been around for almost 35 years, and essentially we started in the mid-1980s when there was an insurance liability crisis, where it was very difficult for local governments to obtain liability insurance, or if they were able to, they were subject to very high deductibles, increased premiums, limited coverage, et cetera, et cetera. And it all stemmed from the environment at that time where there were various judgments and decisions and claims that were paid on liability claims involving local government, where the property and casualty insurance business lost its appetite for local government entities. So what happened was the UBCM decided that there has to be an alternative and not have to rely on the P&C companies to provide the insurance. So what happened was, if you go to the next slide, Megan, was the MIABC was created. Long story short, or short story long, risk insurance pools, were created around that same time, not just in Canada, but in the U.S. and around the world. And the whole idea was essentially, to pool your resources and to pool your risk, and essentially cover each other. And it's been very, very effective. And as you can see from this slide, well over 100,000 public entities throughout North America get some form of coverage through a pooled program. And Megan's already alluded to why is that, and that has to do with having broad coverage, stability of the program, ownership, which is something that we really emphasize, and a focus on risk management, which is very, very important. So the other thing I wanted to point out on this slide was, over $20 billion in premium were lost to the insurance industry because they decided to essentially abandon local government entities and provide them with insurance. That money, that premium has never come back to them. And there's a good reason for that. And the ironic thing about the whole thing was that this crisis was actually quite short-lived, because a few years later, things kind of settled down and liability insurance was available again. It was, maybe a little pricier, but all of a sudden the insurance industry was willing to provide that coverage again. And unfortunately for them, it was too late. Pools were created, and they've succeeded, they've thrived, and billions of dollars in premium funds have not gone back to the insurance industry.
Just to touch on what Sherman just said, we're now seeing in a hard insurance market where insurance rates are rising, we're seeing this idea of the insurance pool coming back again. Different areas of different services are exploring it. And we've been contacted by a number of different organizations kind of sussing out what is reciprocal pooling all about. So it's almost like local governments are on the cutting edge of this now that it's being explored by other entities. So I just wanted to touch on some of the member services that we do provide at the MIABC. And I'd like to talk about them in terms of categories. So when you are sharing the risks of other local governments in British Columbia through the pooled model, you want to make sure that they're controlling their risks. And so the risk management is a real cornerstone of the MIABC's services. We provide advice and education to our members on how they can control risks through programs such as our Ask Us Anything service, where our members can call and ask questions about coverage or risk management advice. We also, this past year, launched our Ask Us Anything Insurance and Risk Management blog, which arose out of first responding to questions about COVID-19 and controlling those risks, and now has expanded to a more general service. We have our Casual Legal Advice program, which is one of our most popular services. Members, for a very nominal fee, subscribe, and they get an unlimited number, or they get 30 minutes of free legal advice and an unlimited number of issues in the year through our third-party service provider, Lidstone and Company. We have our annual risk management conference, which just passed last week. And then we look at how can we help our members assess their risks. And so we have a number of services that address this area. Our closed claim file reviews, so we can pass on lessons we've learned from claims that we've paid out. Policy audits, so we can help our members review their own policies to see if they're defensible. Our claims data analysis, where we can look at your claims and provide specific risk management recommendations. Our new loss control service. So we do site inspections, virtual inspections, and one of the most popular aspects of this new program that we launched last year was we now help our members develop policies like maintenance and inspection policies for the services that they're offering to the community. We also help our members fund risk management initiatives through our risk management grant program, scholarships that we provide to staff so they can get risk management designations, our brochure service that we produce brochures complimentary for our members to hand out, for their frontline staff to hand out to members of the public, advising them of how to report a claim and why the local government might not be liable for their loss if they've sustained property damage. And then special projects, like we helped to draft, or we drafted a model building bylaw when the Building Act was modernized about 5 years ago. We also developed many tools, including our recommended minimum of insurance requirements for contracts. That's a mouthful. That's a document that can help your staff determine how much insurance to require from contractors that you're hiring. And this is one I want to just talk in a little bit more detail, and I think we're almost out of time. So I'm just going to ask the board chair if we could have a bit more time to address this and then the claims perspective of the MIABC.
Oh, absolutely. I'll look to my colleagues for an extension. If you can just indicate either by voice or
So
hand. Moved for extra time, seconded by Director Wilson. All those in favor, please. I'm going to say that passes. Thank you. Carry on, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is one I just wanted to pause on for a moment, because I think there were a number of questions around some of our insurance products or insurance services 3 years ago, and I understand there are some questions that have arisen more recently. So the MIABC, one of sort of the areas where we get a lot of questions is where there are community groups that want to offer events or services to the community. And they kind of tend to fall into 3 different camps. So there's our categories. The first is volunteers. So the MIABC Liability Protection Agreement, which is your liability insurance policy, does cover the acts of volunteers. So if you're sued because the volunteers have perhaps missed something that's led to an injury or property damage, and the regional district is sued, volunteers are covered just like employees are covered. Okay, but the volunteers have to be providing that service to the community on behalf of the local government, and they need to be reporting to a staff member at the local government. So you as a board, a staff, your leadership needs to be aware that these are your volunteers and you have complete control over them. The second category is really around where you've got a community group that can't get insurance and they're delivering services to the community on your behalf because you just don't have the staff or the volunteer basis to do that. And that's our associate member program, where you can actually bring those independent groups or individuals under the umbrella of your own insurance policy. But there's financial implications. And I think we discussed this 3 years ago. There's financial implications where it is under the board's policy. So the board's deductible applies. And if there is a claim that would count against the board's experience rating, it will count against the board's experience rating and could impact your premiums in the future. But that's a way of getting some help in delivering services that you can't otherwise deliver to your community, and you're willing to take on that risk. So you're actually courting new risk. The third area is what I want to talk about right here is the MIABC event policy portal. And that's quite different, but I think sometimes it gets confused with volunteer coverage or the associate member program. The MIABC event policy portal is meant to transfer risk away from the board. So away from the regional district. So the idea here is you would have members of the public who want to rent your facilities, Maybe they want to throw a birthday party. Maybe they want to have a wedding. Maybe they have a soccer league that wants to use your fields. And you're willing to lend them the facilities, but you don't want to incur the risk that comes along with it. You don't want to get sued if they do something that causes an injury to someone else. And so you want to make sure that they are going to indemnify the regional district if there's a claim because of something they did. And you also want to make sure that they have insurance, because it doesn't really help if they indemnify you if they don't have insurance. They can't pay the indemnity. So the MIABC policy portal is a portal that you can sign up. Each local government can sign up for free. You register all your facilities on it. And then the portal allows, you give facility renters the portal address. They can go in on their smartphone. They can register for insurance. They get a quote, and then they pay for it on their credit card, on their phone, and then it sends a copy of the insurance certificate to the local government. So it's a way, the volunteer and the associate member program, those are reporting risk, that's your risk. This is a way of transferring risk away from the regional district. I'm happy to take questions. I'll look to the chair because I know that this was perhaps an issue of interest. I can take questions at the end, or I can take questions now on this. It's up to you. It's up to the chair.
If my colleagues can hold their questions till the end, I think that would be more appropriate, and then we can
Perfect.
have them all.
Thank you. Okay, some of the other tools that we offer are sidewalk inspection tools and templates. We're also working on a new policy toolkits. So templates to develop policy, inspection and maintenance policies beyond sidewalks. So for roads, for parks, for drainage. So having those templates and then documentation templates that will really help build defensible policies. And I'll just take a moment. This is a sort of a snapshot of the regional district's use of the member services. So when I look at this snapshot that our data analyst created, you know, it says to me, you've got in 2019, 2020, we captured 20 inquiries from Cowichan Valley's staff asking questions like, what's our risk if we decide that we can't staff our public beaches with a lifeguard during COVID? And what should we do to kind of minimize that risk? Or, you know, what do we do when we have cracked asphalt on our tennis courts? And but we want to defer the maintenance and repairs to keep our taxes low in the next year. How do we deal with that situation to minimize our risk? So those are the kinds of questions we've been answering for you. We've hosted 60 webinars in the past 2 years, and we've had 109 attendees from Cowichan Valley staff. So you're really getting a lot of use out of those webinars. And a lot of the COVID webinars were very popular with your staff. Your staff have attended our conference every year that we've had a conference. And you have had $85,000 in risk management grants. And 23,000 of those have been spent on liability assessments, such as the assessment of the biodiesel facility at the Bings Creek transfer station. And with that, I will pass it on to Sherman just to say a few things about claims management.
Thank you. Something I say all the time about claims management is I feel the best way to manage a claim is not to have it in the first place. So I'm a strong believer of risk management and the activities that Megan and her people undertake all the time. The best I can do when a claim happens is to manage the expenses, the costs, the litigation. That's what my job is. And in a nutshell, what a claim is, and the bar or threshold is not very high. Simply put, it's an allegation of negligence or wrongdoing, and combined with a demand for compensation. So that can come in the form of a letter, an email, whatever. The bar is quite low to trigger a claim. That's essentially what we define as a claim, and the information that's usually sent to us. Our liability protection agreement, Megan's kind of mentioned something about it already. The policy is broad in two respects. It's broad with regards to who it covers, as far as employees, elected officials, directors, board members, but it's also broad with regards to the scope of the coverage. And the key here is as long as the officials, the board members, the employees are acting within the scope of their duties, then coverage is usually not an issue. However, with any policy, any insurance policy, there always are restrictions or exclusions, and our policy is no different from that. But at the end of the day, we pride ourselves on providing the broadest coverage possible to our membership, because essentially our members decide on the coverages that they require and need, and we are constantly reviewing the policy to make sure that there's no gaps in that coverage. So the most common type of claims, as you can imagine, would be bodily injury claims, property damage. That would be like a sewer backup or a tree limb falling on a vehicle, on a home. Errors and omissions, that really relates to negligent building inspection claims, zoning issues, law enforcement. And as Megan indicated, the regional district is one of the first members to join the property insurance program. So we also now provide first-party property coverage. And I'm very happy that the regional district, did join the property program. And you may be aware that we're currently dealing with a very large water damage claim for the regional district. But that's what insurance is for. So that's not a big issue. Where we differ from other property and casualty insurers is our philosophy. We're known to take a very principled approach when it comes to liability claims. We emphasize, a thorough and a thorough investigation. It's very simple that if we feel that there's liability, we will negotiate and resolve the matter as quickly as possible. However, if the member is not liable, if there's no negligence, then we will defend them, and that's what our membership expects. In a situation where there's multiple parties and there might be exposure, again, we will negotiate a settlement, pay our portion, but we're not going to pick up someone else's. And the final thing that's quite different, and something that I had to adjust to coming from, the private insurance market, is not paying a claim because a claimant is a nuisance or paying for economic reasons. As I said from the outset, we have a very principled approach to claims, and there has to be some sort of liability exposure before we make a payment. We also have a philosophy as it pertains to property coverage. This is a more recent philosophy that we came up with as our property program is entering its 5th or 6th year. But we felt that we needed to have a philosophy, and it really is about balance and fairness and treating our members and giving them every benefit of the doubt if possible. And then the last slide here is really has to do with the regional district's claims profile. And whenever we look at claims, when we do an analysis, we're always looking at frequency, which means how often you're getting that sort of claim, and severity, meaning how much is it costing you. So it's a very good tool for us to look at as far as what areas we need to focus on. And when we look at the profile for the regional district, there's nothing unusual about it as far as the regional district is concerned. Parks and Recs as a high frequency, high severity, that's not a surprise to me, because I don't know how many, but you probably have many facilities and parks and other fields and things like that throughout the regional district. And people go there. There's a reason, and things happen. So there's really nothing unusual about the frequency or severity. I thought it'd be just good for you to know, what are your top 5 in both categories. My final comment has to do with the profile of the regional district's claims as far as bodily injury, property damage, and errors and omissions. Again, nothing unusual other than it does differ from the overall profile of the membership, because regional districts are unique. They are different. They don't provide or are responsible for roads, sidewalks, sewers, drainage, and those are the high frequency claims that we typically see. Those are our number 1, 2, 3 claims that we usually see. So the profile percentages are slightly different. Your bodily injury is a bit higher, but your property damage is way lower than the average. And your errors and omissions are a little bit higher as well. But again, nothing that's unusual or problematic as far as we're concerned.
And that was sort of the Coles Notes version of our overview of the MIABC. So we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you very much. I'll let you stop sharing your screen and my colleagues will come up so I can see them. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Charlton and Mr. Chow for your presentation. Very interesting. The graphics I do like. Thank you very much. And I have Director Wilson, Director Morrison, Director Smith, and we'll start there. Director Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the MIA. That you guys do a great job, and I always enjoy the presentations that you give. One of the things that I know you're a non-profit organisation, and I'm sure that at the end of the year, I would hope there's some money left over in the bank, and you haven't had to go bankrupt or anything. What actually happens to that money? Do you reinvest it, or is it used as a reduction in premiums for people, or is it just kept as money in the bank for future use?
You want to take it, Chairman, or?
Oh, yes, I'll take that question. We are a nonprofit, but it doesn't mean we go out of our way to lose money on behalf of our membership. It's any surplus essentially goes back to the membership in various forms. The most prevalent one is it goes back as subscribers' equity. Every year we're trying to hit that target through the advice of our actuaries is to figure out every year how much premium we need to collect in order to pay the anticipated claims. And usually we're pretty good at that. Even when we're not, any excess essentially will go into our capital, our surplus. And at the end of the day, if the MIABC ever wound down, the membership would get part of that. But the other key thing is something we didn't mention in the presentation about our retention, our deductible for every claim is in excess of $7.5 million. That's how much of a retention we take. And in order to do that, in order to have the ability to take such a high retention, we need to have capital. So, so at the end of the day, it's not for profit. If we have a very good year, it goes to our capital. It gives us flexibility as to paying dividends, paying risk management grants, reducing rates or subsidizing rates, which we have done in the past. All the money essentially belongs to our membership. So if we have a great year, it's great for the membership. If it's a bad year, it's a bad year for the membership. And to put things in perspective, we are in the insurance business and we do pay large claims. And a good example is, the water damage claim we're dealing with now. The reserve on that might be $1 million. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chow.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Morrison, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our guests. Great presentation. You are a very well-run organization, like the services that you provide us to help us stay out of trouble, so to speak. I've got a couple of quick questions, and Mr. Chair, if you would, could you put me on the bottom of the list for a third at the end? So I'm a bit of a maps and graphics kind of guy too, and was a little disappointed on your the map that you had on the slide that shows providing legal advice. You've got the United States of America mentioned on there, but you don't have one single regional district in the province of British Columbia on the map. So I think you could probably find a better map for your presentation. But seriously, just one note that that the both of you mentioned a little differently on the volunteer coverage. It used to be that volunteers, provided they were under the direction and responsibility for a staff person or director, and Megan, you'd said just staff person, and I think Sherman said staff person or elected official. So, we used to be able to be, as community members and members of the board, responsible for a group doing a volunteer activity, broom pulling, or that sort of thing. So are we still able to be that CVRD person responsible for the coordination and responsibility for a volunteer effort or activity?
Yeah, the answer to that is the liability protection agreement specifically refers to employee, but we do extend that to elected officials.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll put you on the end of the list here. Director Smith and then Director Salmon. Is there anyone else while I'm looking? Director Smith, please.
Thank you. I really enjoy your presentation. I remember going to, I think it was AVICC or LGLA, and having an opportunity as a new director at that time to be informed for our CVRD and the regional district. It was very interesting. So I'm the person who's got the questions about the event policy portal because that kind of goes back a couple of years when we lost our parks commissions, were able to host events like our Halloween event and our Easter event. And then some things changed and they were no longer able to host them, and there was basically they had somehow been covered under the CVRD insurance. I think we assumed that, but maybe that wasn't quite the case. So we moved forward, and so the events policy portal is for a nonprofit society. I remember at the time that the CVRD wasn't signed up for it, and I believe that one of the staff members was able to do that. When we have a nonprofit society that would like to do an event in one of our, say, parks, they can go onto this portal and work through it. Now, I think it doesn't allow sports events because I think I ran into that when I was looking at having a family fun day. If people were running around in activities such as, you know, egg spoon race or sack race, they didn't cover that. Are you familiar with that policy, and is that still the case?
I am not, but I'm just texting the person who is to see if I can get a very quick answer, because I know it used to cover sports, but it may have changed. Sherman, are you?
I'm just aware that some policies will have specific participant exclusions. It's one thing having an event and doing things that are pretty straightforward, but then there are sometimes the insurers do not want to cover the participants if they are engaging in an activity that might be considered dangerous or have some potential to it.
Right.
But
So
that's just an overall thing. I'm not sure specifically with regards to the portal and the insurer that provides that coverage.
So what some of the things are like pickleball or tennis and those kind of things if they decide to have a tournament or something?
So I do have a response, no contact sports. So Marina Sen, I think staff can probably contact Marina Sen, who's our insurance services coordinator and is responsible for the administration of the event policy portal, and she has a list of supported activities. And we can send that along to staff, and then they can pass that along to the board. But what she's telling me is it's no contact sports.
Okay,
Director
so
Smith.
I have a follow-up.
Okay.
You also have a service provider agreement. Is that what you were speaking of earlier when you were talking about an associate member program?
Yes.
And that is the one where the CVRD can sign up a group under the CVRD, a nonprofit society, under the group, but the liability of the deductibles would fall to the CVRD, and that is quite a hefty amount. So I know that we've moved away from that one, but
You're not the only one. Some other of our members also balk at the idea of essentially providing that coverage and then being responsible for deductible as well as any loss experience if they do.
Yeah, and I think our deductible was something like 25,000, so that was definitely, but I was just wanting to double check if that had changed. But thank you for this information. I appreciate it, and I look forward to finding about the supported activities because I think that really helps the community and the nonprofit societies that are trying to, host events in our facilities and parks and trails. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I have Director Salmon next, and then I have second speakers, Director Morrison and Director Wilson. Anyone else? Director Salmon, please.
Thank you. So just a quick question, skateboard parks. I've always been curious about the liability. Are they any more dangerous? Are they as dangerous as they look? Is it any worse than any other recreational activity?
When they were first proposed and first built, we had concerns, a lot of concerns. It's a non-issue. I could probably count on one hand how many liability claims I've received involving skate parks. It's not a problem.
Interesting. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'll go to my second speakers list. Director Morrison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think this one might be for Sherman. I think you're a great organization. You do great work. You take a huge burden off the shoulders of elected officials and local governments. But I just was wondering if you might maybe go into a little bit more detail as to the claims handling process. I don't know whether you'd remember, but newly elected 10 or 12 years ago, MIABC settled a claim that is still resonating in my community that people are really upset with, and their director is one of them. And I know that you make fiscal responsibilities around which cases to pursue and which not, and one particular part about this one, I don't think there was any disclosure requirement or non-disclosure requirements at the end of the settlement. So anytime I happen to run into a particular community member in the public, he talks about how he took the CVRD for everything he could, and that's an unfortunate thing. But I think most of my colleagues may be unaware of what little or how much control that you have over the process and how little we do as far as the client.
Well, the process is, we've had feedback in the past from our membership with regards to what you're saying, is that at the end of the day, to put it bluntly, the MIABC has full authority to settle claims. But we found that sometimes there might have been a little bit of lack in communication. So what we do is we provide regular updates to our contact at the regional district. We provide, if matters go into litigation, we provide litigation reports, we provide status updates, we provide emails. We will inform our contact if a matter, we feel that there's exposure and it should be settled. We want to get in front of that to give you an opportunity if you don't agree or if you have additional information that might change our view. We want to do that before we settle it, and then that comes to us later when it's too late to do anything about it. I can't tell you how many times we've had situations where plaintiffs will brag about a settlement, and we can't stop them from doing this. Sometimes we will try and request or negotiate a confidentiality clause in the settlement, but that's not always doable. It's also sometimes not worth the paper it's written on, because if the claimant or plaintiff wants to spout off, we can ask for our money back, but we'd have to go through the whole process, and it's just not worth it. Again, I mentioned earlier that we have a very principled approach, and we don't pay claims just to make them go away. There has to be some sort of exposure or concern on our part. And we try to communicate that to our members so they know what's going on, they know what we're planning to do. And like I said, we welcome any feedback or additional information that might change. But at the end of the day, sometimes we may not agree on the situation. Sometimes it might be, sometimes it could also be that there's insufficient information provided to the member, and that's something that we work hard on in order to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Director Wilson to close, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back very slightly, and just so I got it clear in my mind here about the way that directors can interact with their residents on being, I've got in my notes here, as a reporting person. if you like, and acting as the staff member that they report to. So if I've got this right, without any contact sports, if somebody comes to me, not as an association board, but as, let's say, I want to have a birthday party on the park there, I could say, yeah, you're covered, and I will be there. Or if I can't be there, what I'm trying to say is, can I authorize that kind of thing? What can I or can't I authorize without coming to you or to the CBRD independently?
So you don't need to come to us to authorize an activity, but in terms of independent groups that are using your facilities, that's really about the CBRD's policies, internal policies and procedures. And with most local governments, that's a decision that's made by staff. That's an operational decision. When we talk about directors or staff and volunteers, that's something that's very different, where the volunteers are the CBRD, through the interaction with staff or sometimes elected officials, but most often staff, will have control over the activities that the volunteer is doing. So, you've got a group of volunteers that are maintaining one of your parks. They're, planting some flowers, they're doing some weeding. And the staff member or possibly the director, if you've got a committee there, like a food security committee or something like that, then they would be aware of, okay, what is the schedule of these volunteers generally? You don't have to know all the details. And, no, we don't want them to be working in this particular area of the park, but we do want them to be working in this particular area of the park. Like, you've got some control over their activities. When you have somebody that's just coming in and using your facility or using your parks or your space, you don't have any control over their actions. And so that's really a facility rental agreement, where you're giving permission to that group to use the facility for their birthday party. That's got to go through CBRD process, whatever that process is. So, and typically most local governments, that's a staff operational decision.
Yeah, that's good. That's clear. That's clarified things nicely. Thank you very much.
Great. Any further questions or comments? Director Smith to close. And let's, with the event that you talked about, let's not get egg on our face.
I use the Easter plastic eggs. They work really good. You just put a rock in it and away you go with your spoon. Come on over. And one of the things I just want to, expanding a little bit on Director Wilson is, so the director, if they organize an event, the director is covered, but the volunteers that are helping the director, they're not covered under MIABC, are they?
No, they would be covered under MIABC as long as it's a board initiative. And you really have to think about, is this something that the local government, the regional district, is it your initiative, your activity? So if you have an Easter egg hunt or the egg races, that's something that you as a local government want to offer to the community. You don't have staff to do that. So you've got a committee and you've got a group of volunteers that's going to put that on. Right? You've agreed as a board, management, the administration has agreed this is a risk that we want to take on because it's worth it to us to offer this event to the community. So you've got control over what happens, and then your volunteers are covered. And not only are they covered for liability purposes, if they get injured, we also have accidental death and dismemberment coverage for the volunteers because they don't fall under WorkSafe. Okay, so there's a lot of coverage for volunteers, but it's really contingent on the regional district having control over the event and the control over the volunteers' activities. If it's an independent event where you've got no say in what happens, no say on how that egg race takes place, you've got no say in whether there's a big bunny mascot that's coming around, hopping around the park. They just want to use the space, and you've got no input. that's a facility user. That's someone who's just using your facility. You don't want that risk. You got to transfer. You want to transfer that away, and that's why you get them to buy insurance. Does that clarify?
Great. I don't see any other hands, so we will give you the COVID virtual clap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Look forward to seeing you in person at upcoming
Certainly.
event when we can.
We do too. Thank
All right.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So moving on, Ms. Legault, no correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're on to reports. Item R1 is a report from the Finance Division on the revised operating reserve fund policy, along with a recommendation to the board that the revised operating reserve fund policy be approved.
Okay, Director Wilson, are you moving that? And seconded by Director Sebring. Do I have any input from directors on this one? Director Smith, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the finance department. I noticed that function 456 recreation Saltaire wasn't in the exempt list. Can you give me some clarification on that, please?
I believe that's a flow-through function where the funds flow through and there's not there's not operating expenses. Those ones aren't included.
Follow up, or is that okay, Director Smith? Do I see anyone else? I do not, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R2 is a report from the Finance Division on the approval of short-term borrowing for 2021. And there are 7 recommendations with specific wording required to execute the short-term borrowing, but I won't read them unless the board wants me to.
Director Morrison, you're moving that? Do I have a seconder? Director Stone? Any discussion on these? Seeing no hands, I will call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. Got off easy, Ms. Warner. Ms. Legault, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no other business, so it would just be taking the recess before question period.
Thank you very much. We will take is it 10 minutes? We'll be back at 4 o'clock.
And we're live.
Thank you. That takes us to question period. Ms. Legault, any submissions today?
There were no submissions.
No submissions today. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to acknowledge Director Martman had some connection issues, and I believe you're the only CBRD director in history that has yet to attend an in-person meeting. So looking forward to seeing you in person, sir, when the opportunity arises. So thank you very much, everyone, and looking for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Stone. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? See you shortly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.